Hey, I guess I sit here, right? How's everybody? Is the conference bringing out the best in you? Yeah? Okay, so I'm a computer scientist. I was around to help start the internet, to scale it. I started virtual reality as a thing. I've done all kinds of stuff. And so I've watched how our work has interfaced with humans. And it's a mixed bag. There are some cases where people using our tools, our search, our social media, all these things, I think mostly come out for the better and feel that they have been, that they have found improvement in their life. However, there's a huge number of cases where people do not fare so well. There are too many, especially young people, who endure crises in their psychology and their social lives, even though the whole thing was intended to be good for them. The intention was very good at the start. I was there. For instance, at the start of Google, I sold them one of their first companies, their first AI company, I believe, and I remember how idealistic the young Google was. I remember Sergey and Larry, as students, writing in their paper about search that the introduction of advertising into search would corrupt it and would be a bad idea. It ended up running on advertising, and it turned out they were correct. It was a bad idea. There are many people today who feel that search has become less a service for users and more a service for those who put money into the system, which would be natural enough. So what I'm interested in is, how do we get on that slippery slide where we lose our idealism and things fall apart? What usually happens with digital services, with digital designs, is they start with good intentions, because the vast majority of people active in the digital space really want to improve the world. Not all of them, there are a few bad actors, but they're definitely in a minority. And then you see this fall from grace. What is that? How does that keep on happening? And how do we stop it? How do we change it? So there are a lot of answers. But I want to focus today on the question that I think is the most important one, which is incentives. So incentives are not just about consumer choice in a market economy. They can also be about choices related to status or self-perception. They can be related to all kinds of things. Most of the people in this scene don't know how radical the dominant ideology is in the core of tech these days. I was just keynoting another conference in California, which was a summit of the top crypto and AI people talking to each other. And the prevailing idea there is that there's no point in investing in anything, because AI will become super intelligent and provide super abundance in just 5 or 6 years. So nothing matters right now except AI. Any other investment in any company or social project is pointless. I think that's ridiculous, but that's the level of radicalness in play. And the problem with that is there's this belief that if you make the perfect digital design, everything will come out perfectly. And in fact, there's this gigantic demon in between your digital design and this perfect outcome, and it's called incentives. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about how incentives can be aligned for the good that you seek at the start, and how they can be mal-aligned. I'm going to cover a few different examples. Let me start with the alignment between the individual's interest and society's interest. So the incentives you give an individual might or might not align with the best interests of the larger society. If they're mal-aligned, what happens is the individual works for their own betterment, but it's a very short-term kind of a project that ultimately comes back and bites them. Now, an example of this has occurred with social media. At the dawn of the internet age, there were intense ideologies at play. There was one ideology that was very leftist and communitarian. We should all share. We shouldn't have copyright anymore. We should all be open and everything should be free. Remember that? That was a really big deal. But then we also worship our tech entrepreneurs. We love our Steve Jobs. Tech entrepreneurs are the future. So the problem is that those two ideologies aren't absolutely incompatible, but they're pretty incompatible. One's a kind of an absolutist form of capitalism, and the other is an absolutist rejection of it. You know, at the end of the day, there's a tiny, tiny space where those two overlap, and that's the advertising business model, where the user experiences a sort of a communitarian or socialist kind of experience, a kind of a world, but the company experiences a capitalist world because the customers aren't the users. The customers are dislocated from the users and are this other body of advertisers or other people paying for influence or access in some way. That's a malalignment. What that's turned into, though, is interesting, because from the user's perspective, there's something interesting about economics, which is if you remove one kind of differential on which an economy might be based, one kind of differential where people compete over that differential, like how wealthy you are, as an example, if that one goes away, if you say, oh, everybody's equally wealthy, we've imposed that, then whatever is next up becomes the new economy, right? And so in a free economy, the next step in this case was attention seeking, the attention economy. So everybody is seeking attention. What does that do to you psychologically? Well, here we know too much about what it does. It's even worse than that because you're doing it as mediated by algorithms. The algorithms can only work on feedback, on measurement and response, because that's what's available. The human responses that can be measured more quickly are the twitch responses, or the fight or flight ones, fear, anger. And what happens is the algorithms keep on amplifying and tweaking those aspects of the human character that are most readily measured, and those turn out to be fear, anger, tribalism, xenophobia, and also certain kinds of vanity, a lot of insecurity. So you see this kind of emergent personality type that happens from people who are too online. And they get twitchy, they get vain, they get tribal, they get weirdly afraid all the time and clinging to their allies. I wrote a piece that might get me in trouble in the coming era, suggesting that certain figures like Kanye and Mr. Trump and Mr. Musk, who are both acquaintances, started out with very different personalities, but gradually converged on a similar personality. And it's the personality that is exemplified by being under algorithmic influence and competing for attention within that system. The details of the algorithm don't even matter so much. So an interesting question is, can we imagine a different system? Well, there are a few ways. One of the ones I've explored for many years, and which many people here are interested in, is to change the business model to monetize creativity and value online, so that you have a little bit more of a situation where the customer and the user are the same person. That would be the obvious thing to do. That would bring the online world more into alignment with the commercial world as it existed before, which was less damaging to character and society overall. Not perfect. Anybody who seeks perfection here is going to go away unhappy. All of our solutions are going to be imperfect and messy. But today I want to talk about another angle on the question of incentives for individuals. And this is also one that's been explored. And in fact, it's ancient. And this is the idea that if you want the incentives of an individual to align more with a society, instead of having an enormous sea of individuals who compete against each other, each against each, can you coarse grain it where they turn into collections of people, where the collections of people are the things that gain wealth, that gain reputation, and so on? So these are sometimes called societal institutions. This is not a new idea with the internet. It's an old idea. Some of the people who've explored it particularly well are de Tocqueville, studying why America was not horrible, and Hannah Arendt is another really good one, looking at what makes societies horrible or not. So let me explain how the incentives reverse when you have a group. If you're an individual and you're seeking attention, you might get it by presenting yourself as helpful, kind, useful, but you also might get it by just being irritating and crappy and attacking people. And the truth is that the incentives work out, you can say, the same either way, or actually maybe there's even a little bit more incentive to be terrible, right? Now, let's consider that instead where you're a member of a group. Now, what do I mean by a group? Well, one of the important ideas is that there's all kinds of groups. Some might be a little bit like rock bands, you know, where you have people working together on a creative pursuit. Some of them might be like journals, where they're people who share a brand. Like I write for The New Yorker, that's an example of one. Some of them might be like sports teams, some of them might be clubs, some of them might be a little bit more like churches, all kinds of groups. And crucially, people can be members of multiple ones, and the overlap is confusing, so you don't have one giant fissure with everybody on one side and everybody else on the other side. Now, when you have these, people gain an incentive for their group to do well as opposed to them. So if you're part of some journal and the journal is publishing horrible things like mistruths about medicine or whatever it might be, damaging stuff, it'll get a reputation that drags everybody in it down. So the people have a motivation. If they want to be there, that's fine. But most people don't want to be dragged down. Instead, what they want to do is they'll kind of bug each other to not get quite so horrible. So as soon as you have groups, the incentive gets more spread out over time. So you're not in this instant thing of like, oh, if I go bad today, I'll get more attention. I need to get attention today. Instead, my group has a good reputation, and I want to keep that going. It switches it, not perfectly, but pretty well. So when people are in groups, they tend to behave better because their incentive structure is more spread out over time and over each other, and that smoothness removes the instant response cycle, which is where a lot of bad character traits are rewarded. Okay. Now, there are a lot of other benefits. If you're in a group, you don't have to post every damn day to be doing well, so you don't have to get in this, you know, hamster wheel cycle which drives everybody on social media crazy. This is one of the things I've noticed, that people who do well as YouTubers or whatever can sometimes be incredibly high quality, but they burn out after a few years because the demand of constantly being there on the short feedback cycle is not humanly sustainable. So when you're in a group, you can smooth it out a little bit. There are many other benefits. I'm not going to go over all of them. But so this coarse graining thing, this is not a new idea either. It's been explored. Audrey's work in Taiwan actually is one of the guiding examples that gives us empirical evidence that this is possible. The question is, can we transition our online environment to groups? How would we do it? The transition is always harder than the destination. And I think, let's say, I was around at the start of the internet. I want to be clear, the internet started on bribery, not on self... Like, what happened was Al Gore went around to all the packet switch operators who were not interoperable just out of orneriness and said, you know, like, maybe we can smooth this out a little bit for you guys. And that's how the internet started. Something like that will have to happen in a transition from an individual to a group-based internet, but the benefits will be enormous. Groups have to self-govern, they have to set their own rules. Once again, they have to overlap. and yet the benefits could be amazing. And so maybe a payment structure should benefit groups more than individuals, as an example. Let me talk about another issue, which is, I just talked about the interests of the individual incentive versus the society. I want to also mention something about the individual versus the platforms. So right now there's a great deal of talk in internet circles about how can we use crypto to benefit everybody with some sort of universal income scheme. For instance, my friend Sam Altman wants to have these metal eyeballs that grab your retina, and then you get payments on some sort of crypto thing when superabundance happens and nobody needs to work anymore. Now, no, you're laughing. This is like in my community in Silicon Valley, this is normative. They think all of you in Washington are just kind of wasting your time waiting for the inevitable that we bring about, and they don't really care about you. I just have to tell you that's the truth. It's the truth. Ask them. They'll tell you that. All right. So here's what I want to suggest. All of our schemes are the person out there, the individual, could invest in us. They could get our crypto. They could be part of our thing. But the problem with that is the same problem that made search go bad and social media, which is that at the end of the day, what incentive is there for the platform to still serve those individuals? It can start with the most sincere intention, but there's no ongoing incentive for it to stay in service to the users. None, 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 none. The founders will leave. Nobody will remember these intentions. There has to be some way that the fate of the user becomes the fate of the platform. There are many ways this could happen. If the user is the ultimate customer in a paying economy, then that works. So if all the users go broke, then so does the platform. That's an economic idea. Another idea is that maybe individuals become some sort of corporation or some sort of coin, if you want to be a crypto person, that the platforms invest in, so that if the individual goes down, the equity in the platform also goes down, where those two things become the same. That would be another architecture that could work. That's a very new idea, and there are a lot of kinks to work out on exactly how to do it. But maybe the individual should be investing, like the crypto issue should be investing in the individual instead of in the other direction, or at least in addition. Technically feasible, interesting to work out the details. But the key message here is that our architecture has to align the interests of the big picture, which is society, economy, planet, all of this, with the interests of the individual, whether those are monetary, psychological, whatever they might be, whatever type of incentive might happen when money goes obsolete in 5 years, according to all my friends. What you laugh, that's what we believe. I personally am skeptical, but the thing is, that is the ideology in Silicon Valley. Those incentives have to be aligned from the individual to the big picture, or all intention dies. And we can do it, but we have to focus on it, and that's my talk.
Welcome back to Micah Tilleman and Heather